talked about the two different main types of loops we have available in Matlab, the counter-based loop and the conditional loop. In this video, we're going to be talking specifically about the counter-based loop available in Matlab, the for loop. So here we have the basic syntax for the for loop in Matlab. So you can see we have a new keyword, for, which defines the beginning of a for loop. We also use the end keyword like we saw for if structures and things like that. So let's take a look specifically at how we build this for loop. So we have our keyword for, then we have some loop control variable equals, then beginning colon step colon end, right? We've seen that before. That's how we create a vector. And then between that for statement and the end statement, we have our Matlab commands. So the control variable will count from the beginning value to the end value based on the step size that we give it. The loop will repeat for however many times it takes to count from the beginning to that end based on the step, and it will repeat those statements between the for and the end statement. And once the control variable reaches a value that's outside of the range that we've specified, the loop will stop repeating. All right, so let's actually plug some values into this structure and see what happens. So here we have an example. Our loop control variable is k, and then we have 1:1:10. So to start off with, the value of k is set to 1. We perform the set of Matlab statements that are included within the loop, and then we repeat. At that point, k is then incremented to the value of 2 since our step size is 1. So we start out with k equal 1. We move up to k equal 2. We repeat those Matlab commands a second time. Right? We continue through this process. K gets incremented to 10. 10 is still within that range, so we perform our set of Matlab commands for the 10th time. At this point, k would be incremented to 11. Right? 11 is outside the range of values that we specified. So at this point, then, we would stop the loop from executing, and it would move on then with the rest of the program. Okay, so our loop control variable k starts out at our initial value, ends at our final value, and the Matlab statements get repeated each time we change that value of k. Okay, so let's actually look at some real code with some Matlab commands inside our loop as well. So here we have an example. We have two variables, sum and product, which are initially set to the values of 1 and 2 respectively. And then we have a for loop. We can see again our loop control variable is k. You don't have to use k, but that's what we commonly use. And then we also have 1:3. So if you remember back to when we first started talking about arrays, 1:3 would create the vector 1, 2, 3. So those are the values that the loop control variable k will take on, which means that this loop is going to repeat 3 times. So let's go through and take a look at what happens here. So to start off with, the value of k is nothing, our value of sum is 1, and our value of product is 2. So those are basically going through those first 2 statements there in the code. Now we enter the loop, which means our k variable takes on the value of 1. Sum is then updated based on the calculation that we see there. So that would be the value of sum is 1 plus 0.5 raised to the value of k. K is currently 1, so we have 0.5 raised to the 1. So that's just 1 plus 0.5, which gives us a value of sum of 1.5. And then we have product equals product times 2. Product is 2, so we have 2 times 2 will give us a new value of product of 4. Okay. At that point, we reach the end statement. We still have values of k to go through, so we would repeat. Our k would take on the value of 2. Now we go through and we perform those 2 calculations again. So now our value of sum is 1.5, and we add to it 0.5 squared. So 0.5 squared is 0.25. So we have 1.5 plus 0.25 gives us 1.75 is the new value of sum. Product, again, we updated the value to 4. So now when we multiply by 2, we have 4 times 2 is 8. 8 is now the new value for product. Again, we still have more values of k to go through. So now k increments to 3. We then perform our 2 calculations. So now we have our new value of sum of 1.75 plus 0.5 cubed, which gives us 0.125. So we add 0.125 to 1.75, which gives us a final value of sum of 1.875. And we do the same thing for the product line there. So product is 8. 8 times 2 gives us the final value for product of 16. At this point, we've used up all the values of k that we specified, right? K has reached the value of 3. If we increment it anymore, we'll go to 4. So our for loop ends, and we end up with the final values for sum of 1.875 and product of 16. So now that we've seen the example, let's talk a little bit more about the for loop. So as you saw, in Matlab, we didn't need to have a line or anything that determines the value of k except for that initial statement of the for loop. So what Matlab does is it automatically updates the value of your loop control variable within the for loop. We also saw on the previous example that you can use the value of k within computations. What you can't do is change the value of k. So for instance, you wouldn't want to have a line inside your loop somewhere that says k equals 7. It actually won't change the value of k at all. K will continue to be the loop control variable and continue to count up from your starting value to your ending value. Before, and like we just saw, you can use that loop control variable to calculate other variables or other values. One thing that if you've done programming before, you may have used as your loop control variable the variable I or the variable j. It's common if you were performing loops in maybe C++ or something like that. You don't want to use I and j as your loop control variables when you're using Matlab, because I and j are actually used for the imaginary number, the square root of -1. Okay. So use something else. We use k pretty often. You could use m or n or something like that. Just don't use I and j. So that brings us to the end of this video. Hopefully you now have a better idea of what a for loop is and how to use one in Matlab.